What happens when a farm boy with a pocket full of darning needles decides to dismantle the world just to understand how it ticks? Before the Model T rolled off the line, before the assembly line became gospel, before Ford became a household name, there was a curious kid in Dearborn, Michigan, who turned his mother's sewing kit into a toolkit of destiny. But how did this boy become the man who revolutionized transportation, reshaped labor, and still managed to alienate his own son, flirt with fascism, and publish one of the most controversial newspapers in American history? Why did Henry Ford sabotage his son Edsel's dreams, veto a plan to help the British fight Hitler, and keep a security chief with a pet lion in his office? What drove Ford to demand that every press release mention only his name? What secrets did the Dearborn Independent spill that caused global outrage? And how did Eleanor Clay Ford, the quiet daughter-in-law, orchestrate a corporate coup that finally dethroned the aging titan? This isn't just a story about cars. It's a Shakespearean epic wrapped in chrome, ambition, betrayal, and a ghost that still haunts the garage. So buckle up, because once you start this ride, you won't want to hit the brakes. Dearborn, Michigan, in the mid-1800s, was a quilt of farmland stitched together with dirt roads and the occasional cow-induced traffic jam. It was a place where the air smelled of hay and hard work, and where the Ford family tilled the land with calloused hands and quiet pride. Henry Ford was born on July 30th, 1863, into this pastoral paradise. His father, William Ford, had emigrated from County Cork, Ireland, bringing with him a love of farming and a deep suspicion of anything that didn't involve soil. His mother, Mary Lydigot Ford, was French-American, gentle, and endlessly patient, especially when her son turned her sewing kit into a mechanical toolkit. Legend has it that young Henry, around age 12, dismantled a broken pocket watch using his mother's darning needles, which he had sharpened into makeshift screwdrivers. Why? Because the watch ticked, and Henry needed to know why. He wasn't trying to fix it, he was trying to understand it. Mary, instead of scolding him, simply said, "Well, if you're going to take it apart, you'd better learn how to put it back together." That was the moment she became his first engineer. William, however, was less amused. "Fix the plow, not the clock," he'd grumble, watching his son ignore the farm tools in favor of gears and springs. Henry's rebellion wasn't loud, it was mechanical. Henry's childhood was steeped in hard work, frugality, and a refusal to accept it can't be done. These weren't just family values, they were survival tactics. The Ford farm didn't run on dreams, it ran on sweat. But Henry's dreams were made of brass and steam. When Mary died in childbirth, delivering her 9th child, Henry was shattered. She had been his compass, his encourager, his quiet co-conspirator in curiosity. Her death didn't just leave a void, it lit a fire. Henry became obsessed, not with grief, but with gears. He built a small machine shop in the woodshed and spent hours tinkering, building steam engines, and ignoring the cows. In 1879, at age 16, Henry packed his tools and ambition and moved to Detroit, a city that smelled of coal, sweat, and opportunity. He apprenticed at James F. Flower & Brothers machine shop, where he shaped brass valves and learned the language of metal. He returned home occasionally, but his heart belonged to steam engines and mechanical marvels. By 1891, he joined the Edison Illuminating Company as a night engineer. The job was demanding, on call 24/7, but it gave him access to electricity, tools, and time. By 1893, he was promoted to chief engineer, and it was here that he met Thomas Edison. At a company dinner, Ford nervously presented his idea for a gasoline-powered carriage. Edison listened, then slapped him on the back and said, "Keep at it, young man." That slap was more than encouragement, it was a benediction. Ford went home and started building. In 1896, Ford unveiled his first car, the quadricycle. It had 4 bicycle wheels, a 2-cylinder engine, and looked like a baby carriage possessed by a demon. It sputtered, coughed, and nearly crashed into a wall on its first drive. But it moved, and that was enough. Ford was ecstatic. Detroit, however, was skeptical. A carriage without a horse? Madness, neighbors whispered. But Ford didn't care. He had tasted motion, and he wanted more. In 1899, Ford co-founded the Detroit Automobile Company. It was a disaster. The cars were expensive, unreliable, and assembled with the grace of a blindfolded blacksmith. Investors, including the Dodge brothers, pulled out. Ford was humiliated. He had failed publicly, and in Detroit, failure was sticky. But Ford didn't sulk. He studied. He realized the problem wasn't the car, it was the process. In 1903, Ford launched the Ford Motor Company, backed by Alexander Malcolmson, a coal dealer with deep pockets, and the Dodge brothers who provided parts and skepticism. Ford promised a car for the masses, not the millionaires. In 1908, he unveiled the Model T. It was cheap, durable, and came in any color, as long as it was black. Why black? Because black paint dried faster, allowing for quicker production. Ford wasn't selling luxury, he was selling mobility. By 1913, Ford's obsession with efficiency birthed the moving assembly line. Inspired by meatpacking plants, he broke down car production into 84 steps. Each worker did one task. The result? Production time dropped from 12 hours to 90 minutes. Ford declared, "Any customer can have a car painted any color that he wants so long as it is black." The Model T became a symbol of freedom. America was on the move, and Ford was the man behind the wheel. Ford's $5 a day wage in 1914 shocked the world. Workers rejoiced, Wall Street panicked, but productivity soared and turnover plummeted. Ford was hailed as a genius. Henry Ford was brilliant, no doubt, but he was also the kind of boss who'd rewrite the company hymn to include only his name. Why did he demand that all press releases mention only him? Because Ford didn't just build cars, he built a myth. He believed that the public needed a singular hero, not a team of engineers. In his mind, crediting others diluted the brand. And the brand was Henry. He once said, "Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it." Translation: I do the thinking, you do the welding. Now enter Edsel Ford, Henry's only son, a gentle, artistic soul who preferred watercolors to wrenches. Edsel wanted to modernize the company, introduce elegant designs, expand globally, and even embrace aviation. But to Henry, Edsel was a glorified intern with a fancy title. Why was Edsel constantly overruled? Because Henry saw innovation as a threat to his legacy. He believed the Model T was perfection incarnate, and anything else was heresy. Edsel's ideas were dismissed not because they were bad, but because they weren't Henry's. Watch the life and legacy of Edsel Ford for a touching look at Edsel's quiet brilliance and tragic arc. During World War II, Edsel proposed producing Rolls-Royce Merlin engines for British aircraft. It was a noble plan, help the Allies, boost morale, and prove Ford's global relevance. But Henry vetoed it. Why? Because Henry was a staunch isolationist. He believed America should stay out of foreign entanglements. His refusal to support the British effort earned him accusations of Nazi sympathies, especially since Ford work in Germany continued operations under the Third Reich. Explore this controversy in Henry Ford, Lies, U.S. History, Extra History, which dives into Ford's troubling political entanglements. Ford's newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, became a platform for his anti-Semitic views. From 1920 to 1927, it published a series titled The International Jew, blaming Jewish people for everything from war to jazz music. The backlash was swift and global. Why did he do it? Ford believed he was exposing truths hidden by elites. But his views were not just misguided, they were dangerous. Even Adolf Hitler praised Ford in Mein Kampf, calling him a great man. Eventually, Ford apologized in 1927, claiming ignorance of the paper's content. But few believed him. The damage was done. For a deeper dive, check out Henry Ford, Ignorant Anarchist, U.S. History, Part 4, Extra, which explores Ford's ideological contradictions. Edsel died in 1943, aged just 49, worn down by ulcers, stress, and the emotional toll of being his father's punching bag. His death was a turning point. Henry, now in his 80s, was forced to hand over control to his grandson, Henry Ford II, in 1945. The company was in chaos, financially, structurally, and emotionally. Henry Ford II had to clean house, starting with Harry Bennett, Ford's thuggish head of security, who once kept a pet lion in his office. Bennett ruled with intimidation, and his loyalty was to Henry, not the company. Watch Henry Ford. A Tragic End, U.S. History, Part 5, Extra History for a gripping look at the final years and the Bennett saga. Behind the scenes, Eleanor Clay Ford, Edsel's widow, played a pivotal role in forcing Henry to step down. She saw the damage he had done to her husband, her children, and the company. With quiet resolve, she rallied the board and orchestrated the transition to Henry Ford II. The family saga was riddled with psychological debris, a mix of guilt, grief, and generational trauma. Inside the Ford family, inheritance, tragedy, and the battle for unpacks this emotional roller coaster with gripping detail. Henry Ford died on April 7, 1947, at age 83. He left behind a legacy that was both glorious and grotesque. He revolutionized transportation, reshaped labor relations, and helped birth the middle class. But he also left scars on his family, his company, and his reputation. His most famous quote: "The short successes that can be gained in a brief time and without difficulty are not worth much." Why? Because Ford believed in struggle, in sweat, in the grind. But he never realized that sometimes the hardest work is letting go. Henry Ford was not a saint. He was a man of contradictions, visionary and tyrant, innovator and bigot, genius and fool. His story is a cautionary tale wrapped in chrome and ambition. He taught us that progress comes at a price, and that even the greatest engines can sputter when driven by ego. So next time you see a Ford on the road, tip your hat. Somewhere in the ether, Henry's ghost is probably criticizing the paint job. Love stories like this? Then don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a ride through history's most intriguing tales. More drama, more legends, more truth, delivered straight to your dashboard.